Good evening. What a sight. My name's Allan Rich. I chair AJC's International Relations Commission and have the privilege of serving on the Executive Council. It's appropriate that our next and final speaker tonight comes after that moving tribute to the partnership between AJC and today's German armed forces. He is a man who truly embodies the courage and dignity of those who have served their country in uniform. I'm speaking, of course, of Senator John McCain, a man who needs no introduction and a constant friend. A Vietnam War hero, the Republican candidate for president in 2008, and one of the Senate's most respected voices on foreign affairs. Senator McCain is a longtime friend of AJC, the Jewish people, and Israel. He's a staunch defender of democratic values across the globe, and he has been outspoken in his efforts to ensure that the Iranian regime does not achieve nuclear weapons capability. He has also taken it upon himself to draw attention to the devastation caused by Iranian-sponsored terror groups across the globe. When discussing Israel's security, Senator McCain is crystal clear. The Jewish people must be allowed to live in peace and security in their historic homeland. In 2002, AJC presented Senator McCain with our prestigious Congressional Leadership Award for all these reasons and more. As a global advocacy and nonpartisan organization, AJC values strongly its allies in Congress. Whether combating rising anti-Semitism in Europe or defending Israel's place in the community of nations, Senator McCain has proved time and again that he is such an ally. A final thought. In a critically important way, AJC and Senator McCain share in common a fundamental principle. We both deal with the world as it is, and not as we would like it to be. We both deal with the world as it is, and not as we would like it to be. However, neither of us is willing to accept the world as it is, but instead are dedicated to making it a better, more just place for all people. We are honored that the Straight Talk Express has made a stop at the AJC Global Forum tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Senator John McCain.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you. Thank you for that warm welcome, and thank you, Allan, for those kind remarks, and I'm sorry you had to mention that I lost running for President of the United States. After I lost, I slept like a baby. Sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry, sleep 2 hours. Especially appreciative of those kind words, given the approval rating of Congress these days, 12%. Have you met anyone in the 12% that approve? I have not. I often say, quite often, we're down to paid staff and blood relatives. I'm not making this up. My mother is 102 years old. I received a call from her last week. We're down to paid staff. So, anyway, just came through Reagan Airport. A guy ran up to me and said, "Hey," said, "anybody ever tell you look a lot like Senator John McCain?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Doesn't it sometimes make you mad as hell?" So I thank you, Allan, for the kind introduction, Stanley Bergman, David Harris, all AJC members for your leadership and tireless efforts in strengthening the U.S.-Israel alliance. I'd also like to thank the French Foreign Minister, Laurent Fabius. I think he did a good job, and we thank you for being here, Mr. Minister, for for a very eloquent statement, and I certainly look forward to being invited to Paris to hear it again. I thank you for that. You know, I'm honored always to be with you. I'm honored because for nearly a century, no organization has done more on behalf of the freedom and justice of the Jewish people and the security of the Jewish state than the AJC. This organization was founded to give the Jewish people a voice, not just a voice, but a distinctly democratic voice to champion their rights and advance their destiny after the world was ripped apart by war nearly 100 years ago. In the aftermath of that tragedy, and through the ultimate tragedy yet to come, the AJC has never wavered in defense of the Jewish people and their interests. When threats have gathered, the AJC has always spoken with moral clarity. When threats have gathered, you have always seen evil for what it is, and you have acted and you have led. You have provided warning even when your warnings were not heeded. And you've done so not just for the sake of the Jewish people in Israel, but because you know that those who would do them harm are no friends of America's either. Deep down, those who are driven by evil and violent ambitions may attack Jews in Israel first, but they often harbor the same dark designs for us, for they are enemies of the values of freedom and democracy that have always bound us together. The AJC has been a sentinel for the Jewish people and for Israel and America, and we need you now more than ever. Israel has never been more capable of defending itself, in large part thanks to AJC's relentless advocacy. But as we gather here this evening, I must also tell you that I cannot recall another time in my life when our international challenges have been more complex and more uncertain. Russia has invaded and dismembered a sovereign country in the heart of Europe, posing a threat to the peaceful international system that we and our European allies have endeavored to build since the Second World War. China is using its growing military power to pressure its neighbors and advance sweeping territorial claims over large swaths of international waters in Asia. North Korea and Iran are developing nuclear and missile capabilities that directly threaten our nations. And in the Middle East, the old geopolitical order has collapsed, and in its wake, political and social instability has allowed extremist groups to further take root. Not surprisingly, most of these extremists are deeply anti-Semitic and hostile to Israel. What's perhaps more surprising and more worrisome is a resurgence of similar extremist sentiments in parts of Europe. Groups that once sulked in the shadows for decades, forced to play down their sympathies with fascism, are now reemerging, and with them we are seeing a troubling rise in anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and often intolerance of minorities. This should concern every one of us. And yet, despite these gathering dangers, record number of Americans want to pull back from the world. This is not good for America or for Israel. After painful experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's not surprising that many Americans are war-weary. But if history teaches us one lesson, it is that evil is real, and our highest hopes for peace and freedom do not secure themselves. The tide of war does not recede just because we wish it to. Now as before, we must recognize a basic fact. The difference between a world that is growing in security and hope and one that is drifting toward anarchy and darkness is the credibility, capability, and resolve of American power and leadership. Unfortunately, it is that American leadership that is so lacking in the world, and we are paying a very heavy price. Nowhere is this more evident than in the Middle East, which is descending into extremism, war, and despair. Syria has become the epicenter of a regional sectarian conflict with more than 150,000 people dead and 1/3 of the population driven from their homes. Key U.S. partners such as Jordan and Lebanon are being destabilized by the massive influx of refugees. The resumption of civil conflict is growing nearer in Iraq, where the level of violence is now equivalent to to what it was during the height of the insurgency, and the black flags of al-Qaeda now fly over Iraqi cities like Fallujah, where so many brave Americans fought and died to finally defeat our enemies there. In Egypt, we are seeing a reconstituted and resurgent authoritarian government that is cracking down on all forms of opposition, fueling violence and terrorism, and sending thousands of its citizens to be tortured and radicalized in the same prisons that gave birth to al-Qaeda. I fear that the Egyptian government's policies will only contribute to al-Qaeda's resurgence in the Middle East and North Africa, which is ongoing, despite the administration's proclamation that core al-Qaeda has been decimated. Indeed, al-Qaeda-affiliated groups are expanding their presence and planning across the region, including on Israel's doorstep in the Sinai and Syria. And yet, looming above all of these growing dangers is the threat posed by Iran's nuclear ambitions. Now the Obama likes to set up a false choice when defending its diplomatic policy, and it reminds me of a story that Henry Kissinger used to tell about the bureaucracy. When faced with a choice during the Cold War, the oldest trick in the bureaucratic book was to offer a menu of 3 policy options. First was appeasement, second was nuclear war, and third was whatever policy the bureaucracy wanted. That is basically the administration's argument on Iran. If you don't support our policy, you are either for or doing nothing or going to war. That is intellectually dishonest. No one responsible is opposed to sitting down and negotiating with the Iranian government. No one responsible is opposed to seeking a diplomatic solution. We should not be opposed to striking a deal. We should be opposed to striking a bad deal, and I fear that that's where we're headed. What would a bad deal look like? For one, a bad deal would concede a large-scale enrichment capability to Iran, one that allows Iran to maintain and operate thousands of centrifuges. The administration may insist that it's not recognizing a, quote, right to enrich, but if a deal gives Iran the ability to enrich uranium on a large scale, then the right to enrich is mere semantics. It has effectively been conceded. A bad deal would not require Iran to dismantle its heavy water facility at Arak and close off the possibility of a plutonium path to a nuclear weapons capability. A bad deal would not require Iran to open to the world its nuclear facility at Fordow, a once covert military facility that was dug deep into a mountain. A bad deal would also limit international inspections, monitoring, and verification measures only to declared sites. International monitors must have the ability to inspect any site, anywhere, anytime in Iran. That is the only way to guard against the threat of a covert nuclear facility, which Iran has developed in the past. If the administration makes a deal that contains elements such as these, we should reject it, because it would not prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapons capability. Instead, such an agreement would leave that decision in the hands of Iran. It would be the agreed framework with North Korea all over again. As with North Korea, we must remember who we are dealing with in Iran. This is not Japan or Brazil or France. The Iranian regime is a brutal tyranny. It calls openly for Israel to be wiped off the map. It has a long history of lies, deception, and cheating when it comes to its nuclear program. We must also remember that the threat posed by the Iranian regime goes far beyond its nuclear program. Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism and the lifeline of terrorist organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah, which seek to destroy the state of Israel. It pursues policies of assassination and subversion and works actively to destabilize Arab governments across the region. It trains and arms militant groups from North Africa to the Gulf to Afghanistan. It has poured arms and assistance and even its own military and intelligence operatives into Syria to aid and facilitate Bashar Assad's slaughter of the Syrian people. It even sought to assassinate the Saudi ambassador in a restaurant right here in our nation's capital. In short, Iran seeks to dominate the Middle East, shifting the balance of power in its own favor to the detriment of our allies in the region. So while many Americans ask how we can afford greater spending on defense and foreign assistance and other tools of global leadership, I would ask, how can we afford not to? Withdrawing from the world is a luxury that America can never afford, not now, not ever. We can't escape the world's challenges, and we can't pivot away from its threats. This is not what America does. America leads, and it is important for our national interests and those of our allies like Israel that we do, because as recent events have reminded us, if America does not lead, others will, and they will most likely be those that seek to do us harm. We must remember that the expansion of freedom, democracy, and prosperity not only makes our world more just, but also more secure. We must stand up for people who share our values because it's right, and because we have an interest in shaping conditions in the world that allow our citizens to live in peace and freedom at home. That's why we must stand by the new Ukrainian government by providing both economic support and greater military assistance. It is shameful that we are not providing military assistance to the Ukrainian government. This is why we must support allies and partners in Asia in the face of bullying by China. This is why we must do more to end the suffering and violence in Syria and support a moderate, democratic opposition to Assad's rule. And this is why we must prevent Iran from developing a nuclear capacity and exporting terrorism across the globe. I know that idealism in foreign policy is a tough sell right now, but we cannot allow the reasonable desire to prioritize our own domestic challenges to come at the expense of meeting our unique responsibilities of world leadership, particularly our support for the values of rule of law and human rights and democracy. Shame on all of us if we neglect our duty to support courageous people around the world who are struggling and dying for these shared universal values. The AJC has played a critical role in advancing for greater American leadership in the world, and you must continue to do so. You need to help our political parties, our leadership, and our country understand how much is at stake in our world today. You need to demand more of us, both Democrats and Republicans, Congress and the administration, and remind us that if America does not speak up for the values we hold dear, it will only be a betrayal for all that we stand for, but it will ultimately make the world poorer, darker, and a more dangerous place. I know, as you have in the past, you will rise to the challenge just as you have other challenges. Our country needs you now more than ever if we are to remain a force for good in the world, leading by the power of example and through our actions, our advocacy, and our pursuit of a better world. Let me thank you again for all you do on behalf of our country and Israel. The relationship between America and Israel is more than an alliance. It is a union built on the love of liberty and the pursuit of justice, by shared ideals and by shared adversities. Our ties cannot and will not be broken. That is your legacy and your charge to keep. I thank you for your leadership.